5 homicides within a span of just a few days here in Stockton. What are your thoughts on that as mayor?
Well, first and foremost, condolences to the families of the victims and to the communities impacted and to the whole city of Stockton. I know like a lot of us, I entered this year with a lot of optimism. We had a 40% reduction in homicides from the year before. We looked like we were trending in the right direction, and we had no homicides in January. I think this tragedy of this past week reminds us that our work is unfinished and it's not done. And that in times of tragedy, we don't point fingers at each other, but we really come together. So this weekend, on the phone with the police chief, with the Office of Violence Prevention, with community partners. This morning, we had all hands on deck meeting. Tuesday, Wednesday, going out with the neighborhood impact teams to talk to the neighbors and figure out if anyone hear anything, see anything, to kind of bring justice to these families. On Thursday, we're going to have a community vigil at Edison High School at 7:30. And we know that all these things are important, but they're not enough. So we have to keep focused, keep fighting, and keep understanding that we deserve to be a safe community. And that historically, Stockton has always struggled with violence, but that the past doesn't have to be our present or our future. So I'll continue sounding the alarm that we deserve to be a safe community, that we know that it's not all 320,000 people in our city that commit these heinous acts, but the only people most likely to are less than 1% of our population. And again, working with our peacekeepers, community programs like Advanced Peace, et cetera, to do all we can to make sure our city is safe. I also want to thank our police department. Just yesterday, they took 3 or 4 guns off the street in areas near where the tragedies from this past week happened. And again, this is a community-wide issue, a community-wide problem, and we'll do everything we can to create the safety that the people in Stockton deserve.
You touched on a 40% reduction in homicide rate last year by the police department, and then this happens. What do you say to people who were already putting Stockton down, so to speak, with reputation, and this comes about?
Well, I would say Stockton is much more than tragedy. And I think what makes Stockton so great is that even when bad things happen, we always find a way to rebound. Whether it's going from bankruptcy to being the second most fiscally healthy city, whether it's 2012 having more homicides per capita than Chicago and Afghanistan, to last year having a 40% increase, we always bounce back. So this tragedy doesn't define us, but what's going to define us is how we bounce back from it, and how we come together, how we focus, how we use our limited police resources, how we partner with community organizations and neighborhoods to create safety. So this is just it's a tragedy, but it doesn't define who we are as a community. We're a resilient community. We're a loving community, and we're a community that's always fighting for a bit brighter tomorrow. We'll continue to do so.
So, and I mean, you touched on a lot of different subjects on things that you plan to do. You know, people ask, well, what more can be done, even when you put those kind of possibilities out there?
Well, you know, I know I'm only 28, but for the past 30+ years, Stockton has been double the state average in homicides and shootings, which is unacceptable, but also shows this problem is not new. It's something we've struggled with for a long time. So in the short term, we'll continue our strategies with ceasefire, our strategies with advanced peace, focusing deterrence and prevention and intervention on the small subset of our population that we know drive the majority of our violent crime rate. But in the long term, we have to think about what conditions give rise to folks who think that their lives and the lives of their brothers and cousins and fellow citizens have no value. And that means focusing on impacted neighborhoods. It's no coincidence that the folks who are most likely victims for violent crime in our community don't live in Brookside. They don't live in Spanos. They live in communities that also have high rates of poverty, low rates of college attainment, lack of access to things like grocery stores. So the long-term view is really looking at what conditions structurally give rise to these conditions, and that's a long-term process, and we've been doing that work with Stockton Scholars, with the Promise Zone, et cetera, and that work will continue. In the short term, it's really about intervention. How do we focus our resources on the people most likely, and they're all guys, 92% of them are men, most likely to drive our violent crime rate. And I think last year shows that model has some success. And this weekend has forced us to really look back and say, how do we make sure we're doubling down and doing everything we possibly can to create the safety that everyone in this community deserves?